Welcome to the 65th A.W. Mellon Lectures in the Fine Arts. In this six-part lecture series entitled The Thief Who Stole My Heart, The Material Life of Chola Bronzes from South India, circa 855 to 1280, art historian Vidya Dehejia discusses the work of artists of Chola India, who created exceptional bronzes of the god Shiva, invoked as Thief Who Stole My Heart. Graceful, luminous sculptures of high copper content portrayed the deities as sensuous figures of sacred import. Every bronze is a portable image carried through temple and town to participate in celebrations that combine the sacred with the joyous atmosphere of carnival. In these lectures, Dehejia discusses the images as tangible objects that interact in a concrete way with human activities and socioeconomic practices. She asks questions of this body of material that have never been asked before, concerning the source of wealth that enabled the creation of bronzes, the origin of copper not available locally, the role of women patrons, the strategic position of the Chola Empire at the center of a flourishing ocean trade route between Aden and China, and the manner in which the Cholas covered the walls of their temples with thousands of inscriptions, converting them into public record offices. These sensuous portrayals of the divine gain their full meaning with critical study of information captured through a variety of lenses. In this third lecture, entitled Portrait of a Queen, Patronage of Dancing Shiva, circa 941 to 1002, originally delivered at the National Gallery of Art on April 17, 2016, Professor Dehejia explores the patronage of the 10th century queen Sembian Mahadevi, whose bronze workshop created stunning images. It asks how she achieved the status of Ruby of the Chola dynasty in a male-dominated society, and what led her to introduce a special image of dancing Shiva that to this day is the quintessential Tamil icon.
Good afternoon, friends. A warm welcome to all of you. Some of you, I see some familiar faces from previous lectures. There are others who are coming for the first time. A very warm welcome to everyone. And I particularly appreciate the fact that you have come indoors on this absolutely glorious day outdoors to sit for an hour, I promise it won't be a moment more than an hour, in semi-darkness to listen to me. This statuesque queen lives today just across the mall, next to the Smithsonian Castle, in the Freer Gallery of Art. She stands in dignity, regally poised with an elegant stance. Resting her weight on her left foot with her right leg lightly bent, she holds her head high, and her oval face with its straight nose is serene, calm, and relaxed. Her sharply sloping shoulders are held back admirably. Yoga instructors would definitely approve, as her left hand rests elegantly downwards and the right is bent to hold the now missing lotus or water lily. Her low-slung skirt hugs her thighs and legs, is held in place with a simple belt. Her hips are exceptionally narrow, making me wonder if this was the sculptor's subtle way of suggesting that she was a woman who would bear no more than the one child she had borne before she became queen. She is serious and inward-looking, with full lips that are barely parted, yet she invites us to commune with her. Her hair is held back with a diadem, above which rises a tall conical crown, while at the rear, you can't quite see it in this view, a series of controlled ringlet curls rest along the nape of her neck. Her exaggeratedly elongated earlobes do not carry a earring of any type, dangling or otherwise. Elongated earlobes, I've shown elsewhere, are a mark of spirituality in Indian imagery. Every god and goddess in the Hindu pantheon, and for that matter in the Buddhist or Jain pantheon, has such earlobes. So too do bronzes of the saints. Yet that never did away with the necessity for ear ornaments. What happened here? Perhaps the artist was party to the fact that the donor of the image had already commissioned an entire set of jewels for his beloved queen. Knowing that she would be adorned right away with gold earrings, perhaps like these, he may have dispensed with them in his original wax model. And by the way, jewelry to adorn bronzes was standard procedure, and we will spend time with such jewels next week. I had the pleasure of living with this queen for 8 years while working at the Freer Sackler. I'd always been interested in Chola bronzes. My family is from Tamil Nadu in South India, so she's sort of, what shall I call her, my home-based image. I had many questions about her. How old was she when she married a Chola prince? Did he love and appreciate her? How did it happen that her bronze image was carried in procession through the town on her birthday? Wasn't that reserved only for the gods and saints? Why is she modeled on the image of Uma, consort of god Shiva? Today we'll explore the story of this remarkable woman who, when she became Dowager Queen, was given the title Ruby of the Dynasty, Our Lady, Great Queen Sembian. Kulamanikyam Nampiratiyar Sembian Mahadevi. Entering her 70s at the end of the 10th century, the queen had created a Brahmin township, naming it Sembian Mahadevi after herself, and the town bears that name to this day. Her name was attached to several institutions. One temple had a great Sembian Mahadevi plumeria pleasure garden. A water tank was named Sembian Mahadevi Great Reservoir. A liquid measure took her name. She built stone temples. She sponsored a bronze workshop that produced outstanding images. She introduced in stone and popularized in bronze the image of dancing Shiva. Where did this amazing woman come from? And how did she function so successfully in what was certainly a male-dominated society? Her great-nephew was Emperor Rajaraja, and he gave her the authority to issue orders that carried the same weight as his own. One such order of the year 998, recorded in a Shiva temple, tells us that the village assembly and the temple priests received a directive from Queen Sembian with instructions on how exactly certain temple lands should be irrigated. It appears that the queen was clued into practical issues of irrigation and agriculture. But why would the queen take an interest in such a subject? If ever there was a monarchy that rose to power on the basis of irrigation and agriculture, it is the Cholas. The irrigation system that they put into place remains to this day the mainstay of the prosperity of Tamil Nadu. That is one of the richest agricultural areas of India. The topography of the region through which the river Kaveri winds its way, the slope of the land in the deltaic region, and the texture of the soil made all this possible. The Chola genius lay in recognizing how to harness what seemed to be totally disparate and unrelated items. The river Kaveri, close to 500 miles in total length, rises in the hills of the Western Ghats, enters Tamil Nadu through a dramatic set of falls, and flows for a distance of 300 miles before it empties into the Bay of Bengal. Some 7 miles before it reaches the town of Trichy in the plains, the river divides into a northern stream known as the Kolladam and a southern stream which retains the name Kaveri. The two rejoin some 10 miles downstream, thus creating the island of Srirangam, which became a major sacred center dedicated to Vishnu. At this joining point, the bed level of the Kolladam is roughly 10 feet higher than that of the Kaveri, which meant that all the water would flow into the collidum and be lost directly into the ocean, totally depriving the Kaveri Delta of water. It was at this strategic point that the Grand Anicut Dam was constructed. The exact date of this structure remains uncertain, but it has been attributed to an early king Karikala Chola of the 2nd century, an ancient ancestor of our Cholas who came to power in the 9th century. The dam is built of large boulders of granite brought and sunk into the riverbed, and it extends over 1,000 feet across the river. It was first repaired by the British in 1804, subsequently modernized with the addition of automatic sluices. Today, the Kaveri River helps to irrigate 1.2 million acres of paddy fields. That entitles Tamil Nadu to the moniker of India's Rice Bowl. The estimate for the Chola period is 70,000 acres under cultivation. The collidum, which flows in a northerly direction from the Grand Anicut, is not used at all for irrigation. It's dry during much of the year. Ironically, it's always colored blue on maps. It stands by merely to receive the Kaveri's floodwaters, which it then discharges into the ocean, enabling the Kaveri Delta to successfully produce its 2 annual rice crops. But the genius of the Chola irrigation system extends far beyond the fact of the Grand Anicut. Once the Kaveri enters its delta, and we are seeing here a mini section of the delta, the river splits into several smaller rivers that further split into several streams, each controlled by multiple sluice points until they enter the ocean. The creativity of the Cholas lay in building numerous canals and channels across the deltaic region. These decrease in width and hence in the area they irrigate and are numbered from A for the broadest canals to F for those no more than 5 to 7 feet wide to run between fields. This map contains only rivers and A canals. When I tried to put in those labeled from B to F, all I got was an impossible spider's web. But here's an interesting statistic. The rivers themselves extend a total of 1,000 miles. The A-class canals extend 3,500 miles, while the rest of the channels B to F jointly extend 11,000 miles. The waters of the Kaveri's many streams are diverted at numerous strategic and naturally viable points, all the way from the Chola period. Here you see just a modest sandbank that does the job, and it creates these numerous canals and channels. This is a B-class large canal that irrigates over 33,000 acres of rice fields. The smaller channels, as you see here, are part of everyday living conditions. Rice is a crop that requires flooded fields, and the Cholas put in place this ingenious Chola system of canals and channels that enabled such flooding and allowed the rice paddy to thrive. A copperplate inscription of the year 1019 speaks of Parantaka Chola, the ruler with whom we spent time last week, who, and I quote, caused to be excavated hundreds and thousands of deep channels with clear water in order to make the earth extremely fertile. And just ignore that exaggeration of hundreds and thousands. A double rice crop was made possible by the Kaveri River receiving rain from both the monsoons that hit India. The Kaveri rises in the Western Ghats, where it is enriched by the summer rains of the southwest monsoon that drenches the west coast of India. And that flow enables the first rice crop of short duration that is harvested in September. The winter northeast monsoon rains, coming from across the Bay of Bengal and along the east coast of India, directly nourishes the Kaveri Delta, and this enables a second rice crop of longer duration. Rice is indeed a curious and demanding crop. It starts life in a wet nursery. 25 days later, the seedlings must be transplanted, a couple of stems at a time, into flooded fields. The soil of the Kaveri Delta is a dense alluvial clay, it's known as kaliman, that is viscous and sticky and uniquely suited to rice cultivation. It maintains aeration, but it disallows percolation so that the water is retained in the fields, facilitating the flooding that is necessary for rice. Rice paddy demands alternating week-long periods of wet and dry soil even after it flowers. It's only in the last 15 days that the soil is allowed to dry out. Rice is a crop that fosters a cooperative state of mind. What on earth do I mean? A wheat farmer can tend his field and his alone, ignoring other farmers around him. Not so with rice. You cannot flood your field alone. You are per se allowing the same water to flood your neighbor's field as well. And rice growers develop an accommodating and supportive attitude to life that can be very different from farmers of other crops. The multiple channels that crisscross the Kaveri Delta to irrigate the rice fields sustained the prosperity of the towns and villages of the region. It was this agricultural prosperity that enabled the temple culture to thrive, even when political circumstances seemed less than ideal. In the first century of Chola rule, kings shared power with a range of chieftains who each controlled specific tracts of land. Chola kings depended on the active support and goodwill of these chieftains. They needed their assistance to collect taxes and tolls. These were collected in measures of rice. They needed their troops to aid them in warfare with rivals to south and north. And one sure way of ensuring such support was through marriage alliances. And the Cholas entered into strategic alliances of this nature with a wide range of chieftains. This is the context in which we come across our amazing woman patron, Sembian. She was the daughter of a chieftain of the interior region of Kongu, who married Parantaka's second son, Gandaraditya. She appears on the scene first in 941 with an inscribed donation of 90 sheep for a perpetually burning lamp in a temple just outside the town of Trichy. A quiet and appropriate beginning for a young princess who was probably barely in her teens. The inscription does not provide us her given name. It identifies her only as daughter of the Kongu chieftain and wife of Gandaraditya, son of the ruling Chola king Parantaka. Sembian is a title associated with the Cholas from days of yore, the days of those earlier Cholas, while Mahadevi merely means great queen or great goddess. Within 8 years, the young princess's life was transformed. Parantaka's heir apparent, his eldest son Rajaditya, was killed on the Takolam battlefield. And the next year, 950, her husband Gandaraditya became king, and she the wife of a ruling monarch. But things did not move smoothly. Within 7 years, Gandaraditya is no longer king. We're not given any clear information about his abdication, except that an inscription speaks of him as the Lord who rose and went to the west. Since he's known to have been a devout follower of god Shiva, it's possible that he moved to Kerala, which is to the west, along the west coast, as a religious recluse. Sembian's one and only son was not yet of an age to assume the throne, an age that appears to have been 16. And so her husband's younger brother assumed the throne. The young queen was only 28 years of age. What did she do in this difficult situation as an abandoned queen, alone with a young son? Clearly, she was a political and diplomatic animal and an astute judge of character. She laid low, and things worked her way. When her husband's brother died, his son was assassinated, thus enabling Sembian's own son, Uttama Chola, to become king without any opposition. Sembian was in her early 40s now, and she came totally into her own during her son's reign of 16 years, from 971 to 987. She built new stone temples. She rebuilt brick temples in stone at sites marked with a yellow star. Each carried a sizable stone image of dancing Shiva. She sponsored an inspired bronze workshop that produced superbly crafted images for her temples. Consider the manner in which she rebuilt in stone a set of earlier brick temples of ancient renown, celebrated in song by the saints that we encountered at our previous meetings. It's not just that she rebuilt brick temples in stone. That was being done by others too. Rather, she recognized the role of those who made gifts to the earlier brick temples, and she ordered that their contributions be re-engraved on her newly completed stone temple. An inscription on the walls of this temple, Ardure, reads, "In this sacred stone temple, which the glorious Sembian Mahadeviyar caused to be built to Shiva, there were engraved on stone in the year 987 all such gifts as were made to this god in former times and were intended to last as long as the moon and the sun." In another temple that Queen Sembian similarly converted, we find that over half of the inscriptions on the temple walls, 27 out of a total of 49, are copies of earlier records. Each inscription announces, both at its start and at its end, that it is a copy of an earlier record. Her actions in this respect speak to her spirit of generosity and munificence, correctness and honesty, shrewdness and acumen, of a desire to give each person his or her due. And they also speak of an unusual sense of history, of historicity. Temples built in the Kaveri basin prior to Sembian's involvement, and we saw some last week, reveal an emerging style very much in flux. The Queen introduced a consistent iconographic program that is strikingly apparent in the imagery that adorns the hall in front of the sanctum. What was her most important contribution to the iconography of South India? The fact that she introduced the freshly minted image of dancing Shiva into a major niche on the south wall of each of her temples, whether they were newly built or rebuilt in stone. Shiva stands on his right leg with his left leg raised high, poised in a dance that appears to have been termed Deshi or local, and that later on came to be known by a Sanskrit term, the dance of bliss, Ananda Tandava. To these images we will turn shortly. But first, we'll explore bronzes created by a coastal workshop of the mid-10th century, a workshop from which Sembian commissioned several bronzes for a temple she built in honor of her husband at Koneri Rajapuram, after her son Uttama Chola became the ruling monarch. Two stunning bronze creations that feature Shiva with Uma are mentioned in an inscription of the year 979 in this temple. The first, this one, features four-armed Shiva standing in elegant splendor, with his two rear hands holding his battle axe and pet antelope. His left elbow is poised to rest against his bull mount, while his right hand is lowered in a gesture of relaxed elegance. His richly caparisoned bull wears a necklace of bells and turns his head joyfully towards Shiva to lick his master's hand. A diadem frames Shiva's oval face, above which are matted locks piled high, adorned with trumpet flower, crescent moon, serpent, and a central circular medallion, while escaping dreadlocks rest along his shoulders on the rear. This is a continuation, of course, of the established iconography of Shiva that we encountered last week. Shiva is richly ornamented with 2 necklaces, a sacred thread of 2 strands, armlets, elbow band, bangles, rings on 8 of 10 fingers, and, well, I should say, of 20 fingers and 10 toes. A waistband is clasped around his slender torso, while 2 belts, one with the lion head clasp, hold in place his short dhoti. And I give you a comparison to a stone image that's unfortunately damaged from the walls of one of Sembian's temples, even though it depicts Shiva in his manifestation as half-woman with the bull. What about the consort of this Shiva? It's not the image that stands beside him today. Note that this Uma has her right hand extended and is clearly part of a marriage duo, like the one we looked at in our first meeting. So where is the consort for Shiva with the bull? Most likely it is this glorious image from the Calico Museum, a little under 3 feet in height. This sensuous and glorious Uma is an accomplished piece from the Sembian bronze workshop. The second Koneri Shiva, mentioned in the inscription of 979, features Shiva as victor of 3 forts. And no, I'm not showing you the same image once again. The 2 Shivas are so closely similar that we would be justified in mistaking one for the other. But the image now on the left is Shiva with the bull, while the one on the right is Shiva as victor. The same artist from a mid-10th century coastal workshop was responsible for creating 2 closely similar wax images from which these 2 bronzes were cast. You will remember that the wax melts, the wax of the original image, and that the clay mold is broken open so that replication as such is not possible. The sensuously poised form and the oval face with the gentle smile are identical. Differences are minor. Victor Shiva's front left hand is raised to hold the bow. His right hand would have grasped the arrow. He sports a triple stand sacred thread. Otherwise, both images are adorned in almost identical fashion, as you see in these archival photographs. The belts that hold the dhoti in place and the treatment of its pleated bands are identical. Also mentioned in the inscription is one more image, that of Ganesha. And do notice the very similar manner of arranging that central fold. Standing beside Shiva as victor is his willowy consort Uma, tall and slender, softly rounded breasts, and she's richly ornamented in typical fashion. These Koneri bronzes display the unmistakable gravitas combined with sensuous elegance that is characteristic of the Sembian workshop. They represent the mellow maturity that was achieved by the coastal workshop, close to 100 years after its unexpected beginnings with the first images that we examined last week. Certain distinctive decorative details are seen at Koneri, and also in a bronze Uma from a nearby temple, and they reveal the touch of the artists of the Sembian workshop. Let me point out just a couple of very small details. If you look at the decoration along the upper part of the crown, where a circle encloses a full-blown petaled flower, and look at a similar circle at the crown's base that encloses a tassel. The artist didn't need to stop and think of exactly how he would decorate the crowns of his various images. He had a formula, he reused it. It was not important enough to come up with a different decorative motif. Or consider this other minor detail, the very specific manner of treating the pleated double ends of the skirt folds as they rest upon the upper thigh. It's a recognizable signature. And if some of you have noticed that the one on the far left is not quite the same as these 2, you're absolutely right. It is an image that is a precursor of the mature Sembian style. This willowy Uma from the Norton Simon collection bears comparison with the Koneri images. It's a product of the Sembian workshop. Just look at the treatment of the central fold that hangs down between Uma's legs. Also from the Sembian workshop is this enchanting image of Shiva, Uma, and their infant Skanda, the same sort of sensuous gravitas, as well as details of decoration and pleated folds. Coming from the hands of a different workshop is this richly ornamented image of Shiva as victor. His overly slender torso and the slightly off-balance stance reminds us of an early bronze we examined last week, one that we ascribed to the master of the off-kilter style. That coastal workshop clearly continued to produce idiosyncratic images marked by the tendency to push the limits of what appears to be an unbalanced stance. The rear view of the two examples perhaps makes the point even more strongly. It's likely that the victor on the left was created by a grandson or grandnephew of the original master of the image on the right. He seems to have created this image to similarly push the limits of a seemingly off-balanced pose. A brief return to the context of the Kaveri bronzes created by the Sembian workshop. The Kaveri inscription of the year 978 that speaks of the bronzes is in the nature of an accounts book that specifies the payment in measures of rice, what else, to various temple employees, and only incidentally provides a number of details regarding temple ritual that is connected with bronze images. I give you just a sample of the information it contains, starting with the payments made to 3 men whose sole duty was to guard the sacred bronzes. A wise precaution that the temples might do well to reinstitute in the 21st century context of the art market and smuggling. The record speaks of payments made to temple employees engaged to bathe the bronzes with milk curds, ghee, sugar, and honey, to a Brahmin who brought water from the river Kaveri for the further bathing of the bronzes, to those who crushed the sandalwood to make fragrant paste with which to anoint them, for cloth to drape the images, to those who watered the flower gardens, to those who picked and strung flowers into garlands, and to 5 Brahmins whose job was to hold the canopy over the bronzes when they were taken in procession. The drapery and adornment we see on the images today is not then a new practice, but it dates back over 1,000 years in the case of bronze images, and even earlier to the wooden precursors of the bronzes. This same Kaveri inscription speaks also of payments made to the chief priest who conducted ceremonies centering on the bronzes, to those who sounded 8 varieties of musical instruments, including cymbals and drums, to those who blew conch shells, and to singers of the hymns of the saints. Extra provisions were made for the major festivals in the months of December, January, and May, June. And additionally, a variety of payments were made to ensure the everyday smooth running of the temple for its maintenance, its upkeep, and its repairs. And special arrangements were made for celebrating a monthly evening service on the recurring birth star of Queen Sembian. 12 birth star celebrations each year, not a single birthday. Before we move away from the Sembian workshop, I'd like to introduce you to 2 impressive bronzes of a Buddhist deity known as Lokeshwara meaning Lord of the World, from a Shiva temple at Mangalore along the Kerala coastline, a good 500 miles to the west. Both Buddhist bronzes bear a close resemblance to images from the Kaveri Delta and to the Kaveri bronzes in particular. Local Kerala bronzes are very, very different in character. They're also a little bit later. For these Buddhist deities, the artists created a hairstyle that is exceedingly close to Shiva's dreadlocks piled high. And in rear view, if you could see them, those same locks are arranged along the nape of the neck, just as is done with images of Shiva. And a third eye adorns the forehead of the Buddhist deity too. But of course, the artist adhered to Buddhist iconographic requirements, and he included a tiny seated Buddha within the medallion that adorns the towering crown-like hair of both images. While Kaveri Delta workshops may have been known for their specialty in creating images of Shiva, it's clear that artists and workshops were not divided along religious lines. Rather, they worked for any patron who requisitioned their services, in this instance, a patron who requested images of a Buddhist deity. A lengthy inscription on the pedestal of the image to the left tells us that a local ruler, who it praises literally to the high heavens, installed this image in the year 968, 10 years prior to the date of the Koneri bronzes. The pedestal inscription may have been added after the image arrived in its new home. It is inscribed in the Sanskrit language and Grantha script, rather than in the Tamil language and script that is far commoner in the Kaveri basin. The fact that a king from the Kerala coast commissioned an image from a Kaveri Delta coastal workshop is testimony probably to the fame acquired by the Chola coastal bronze workshops. And what about the issue of transporting heavy, solid images from a coastal workshop near Nagapattinam to Mangalore on the west coast? I would estimate that the image on the left, it's close to 4 feet in height, inclusive of its pedestal, and it probably weighs around 250 pounds. Was it perhaps shipped in one of the trading vessels that plied the route from China to Aden and beyond? A vessel that stopped at ports in South India and Sri Lanka and then on the west coast to offload certain goods and take on others? Or have we underestimated the efficacy of an overland trade route, the efficacy of the Palghat Gap, which is a pass through the Western Ghats? As we contextualize Sembian's contribution to the artistic, religious, and cultural life of the Kaveri Delta during the second half of the 10th century, I need to point out a fact ignored thus far: her unique status as the one and only queen of Gandaraditya. She did not have to compete with peers for the right to make major donations, or to rebuild entire temples in stone, or to commission bronzes for these temples, to give money for festivals or land for conversion into flower gardens. She was the exalted ruby of the dynasty. By contrast, her father-in-law, Parantaka, had at least 11 queens. We know of them entirely through inscriptions that speak of their donations to various temples. The list of names includes, right in the center in yellow, Kokilan, Parantaka's very first wife, mother of Crown Prince Rajaditya, who was killed in battle in 949, as a result of which Sembian's husband became the king. Marital alliances, we have seen, were a crucial and strategic way of strengthening the kingdom, and they were especially important in an emerging kingship. It's interesting to note that despite Sembian herself having enjoyed the privilege of being her husband's only queen, she recognized the need for alliances with chieftains on behalf of the still small and definitely precarious Chola kingdom. And so she arranged for her one and only son, Uttama Chola, to marry no less than 13 young princesses, daughters of several different chieftains. 5 of them, the first 5 at the top, are mentioned in one single inscription, and they gave gifts to celebrate the birthday of their mother-in-law, Queen Sembian, in the month of April-May. In speaking of the patronage of royal women, it would be well to keep in mind the intense competition that must have existed between the queens for the favors and attention of the monarch. Flowers, garlands of flowers, gardens that supplied flowers were of considerable importance in temple ritual. A Koneri inscription speaks of the temple's 3 flower garlands. One was named after Queen Sembian, tended by 4 gardeners. A second garden was named after her husband, Gandaraditya. A third garden took the name of her son and ruling monarch, Uttama Chola. At this same Koneri Rajapuram temple, an extravagant provision was made in the 13th century, when the right of supplying lily garlands for worship was bought by auction, so to say, by two brothers who became the official temple suppliers of flowers. They contracted to provide 50 garlands every day of the year for daily worship, and then they agreed to provide 44,000 garlands for the December-January festival and 76,000 for the May-June festival. To enable them to supply this yearly total, 139,910 garlands, lily garlands, they were allotted lands appropriate for this purpose, as well as a house. The inscription ends with a dispensatory clause to the effect that in the case of floods or drought, the temple and the town authorities would jointly decide on the reduced number of garlands the brothers were to supply. In addition to flowers that exuded fragrance and provided vivid color to the surroundings, artificial gold flowers, porpu, were a popular item of donation to temple images. Sembian herself presented a gold flower to the image of dancing Shiva in a temple that she rebuilt in stone. Her son Uttama converted a number of small gifts of gold coins into an impressive series of ornaments that included a dedication of 23 gold flowers. A ritual text published recently for the first time devotes one chapter to worship with gold flowers, which seems to have been a very accepted mode of honoring the deity, both the sanctum deity as well as the temple's many bronzes. The text was composed during the 13th century at the very end of Chola rule, but it appears to codify pre-existing modes of worship. It lists 13 varieties of flowers, 6 types of leaves, and tells us that the ritual procedure varied according to the caste of the devotee. It also specifies the benefits that accrue from regular worship with specified numbers of golden flowers. For instance, those who offer 81 flowers over a period of 5 years will be free from all sickness. An offering of 108 flowers for a full 10 years will bestow all your worldly desires and will even bring you close to liberation. We've encountered Shiva as victor of 3/4, as the Lord leaning against his bull, and now we turn to him in his role of wondrous dancer, commonly known as Nataraja, literally dance king. But Nataraja is a Sanskrit word not used in the Tamil country until the very end of the 13th century when Chola rule was ending, and I will more or less avoid the term. Before that time, dancing Shiva was addressed by a number of Tamil names: ruby dancer, beauteous dancer, dancing leader, great lord of dance, expert dancer, wondrous dancer, Arbuda Kutar, wondrous dancer. Is it not amazing a concept to think of your supreme deity as a master of dance? And it is Queen Sembian who popularized this form of Shiva, making his image an indispensable icon for the Tamil country. May I persuade you to step back with me in time to the year 968. With her son Uttama Chola on the throne, Queen Sembian decides it's time to forget the difficult years she has patiently overcome. 12 years of age when she entered the Chola family as a young princess, a mere 21 when catapulted into the role of queen. And then her gentle husband had abandoned her when she was 28. Abandoned, there was no other word for it. He had abdicated the throne and he had disappeared. And she was left alone with this young son to survive palace intrigue as well as she could. Sembian could have been bitter, but she was not. Her loving husband had left her with the fondest of memories to counteract his abrupt departure. She remembered well how resolutely he refused to marry other princesses to ensure the sustainability of the Chola throne. How often he had told her that his love was divided between her and only one other, the expert dancer, Lord Shiva. And in a hymn he composed just before he handed the throne over to his younger brother, he sang of his great longing to see the expert dancer at Chidambaram, the only temple at that time to enshrine any image of dancing Shiva. Sembian determines to ensure that the longing of others to see the expert dancer will be more easily fulfilled. She featured a stone image of dancing Shiva within a niche on the south wall of every one of the temples she built. And her officers and other admirers added a stone image of the expert dancer to the south wall of temples that they built. Devotees could now view the beauty of the dancing Lord right here in the temples of the Kaveri Delta, not necessary to travel to Chidambaram. She also sponsored the widespread production of portable bronze images of the expert dancer, ensuring that all temples would commission such images to be carried through the town in festival processions, where young and old, healthy and infirm, curious and devout could view his beauty. Was the form first created in stone, where it was supported by the backdrop of a stone slab, or as a fully three-dimensional bronze image? A debatable issue, though to my mind not a crucial issue. After all, we know that wooden three-dimensional images of the dancing Lord were taken in procession in the 7th century, when the saints we encountered in our last couple of meetings sang of the Lord who goes in procession in his dancing form. Certainly, the dramatic impact of Shiva's dreadlocks played out around him with the movement of dance is lost in the stone relief, where it is barely visible. I quote you a well-known verse on the dancing Lord, written by Saint Upper in the second half of the 7th century, some 300 years before these stone and bronze images of the dancing form began to be created. The arch of his brow, the budding smile on lips red as Kaveri fruit, cool matted hair, the milk-white ash on coral skin, and the sweet golden foot raised in dance. If you could see these, then human birth on this wide earth would become a thing worth having. If you'd like to hear it in its original Tamil, here's how it sounds. Kunitta purvamum kovai shevvayil kumin shiripum panitta shadayum pavalam pol meniyil paal venneerum inittam mudaya yeditta ponpadamum kaanapetral manida piraviye venduvade inda maanilatte. I should point out that this particular form of dancing Shiva, with one foot raised high in dance, is imbued with deep cosmic significance. To oversimplify a complex set of beliefs, one might say that Shiva dances the world into extinction, only to recreate it again through dance. His golden raised foot signifies Shiva's grace and acceptance of the devotee. The Tamil saints left the philosophical explication of the form to teachers who expounded philosophy, to gurus and to acharyas. The saints focused on the devotees who thronged to the temple, and for them they emphasized only the beauty of the wondrous dancer. While the saints' hymns appear to lay down the basic iconography for this form, it's interesting to observe the experimentation that took place between 950 and 1000, when the first images began to be created in both stone and bronze. I'll start with the fact that these earliest images carry oval aureoles that are replaced by the end of the 11th century by aureoles that are almost completely circular and become the standard for dancing Shiva forever after. Why this transition? Well, all bronze images were framed by aureoles, even though very few remain intact today. This standing image, a late image of the 13th century, only required an aureole in the shape of an inverted U, and inscriptions specify that these were cast in 3 pieces, 2 pillars and a crescent-shaped top. When a dancing figure with one leg raised in dance was introduced, the aureole needed some adjustment for the lifted leg as also for the outstretched hands of the dancer, so the aureole took on an oval shape. Gradually, as the outstretched hand holding the drum was extended further and the foot was extended further, the oval opened itself up until it resulted in its final, fully circular form. Another distinction is the presence or absence of the river goddess Ganges in Shiva's dreadlocks. Hindu mythology tells us that when the heavenly river Ganges agreed to descend to earth, she asked Shiva to break the force of her flow by receiving her in his dreadlocks and then gently allowing her to flow down to earth. These two early bronzes omit the river Ganges, despite the fact that child Saint Samandar sang of Ganga's murmuring stream flowing over the cool crescent moon in the locks of dancing Shiva. She just isn't there in these two bronzes, earliest bronzes. With this dancing Shiva, the wax modeler decided to use one of the flames along the aureole as a support for his river goddess, his personified river goddess. Another image that places the Ganges against the band of the aureole comes from one of the temples of the Sacred Seven that we considered last time. The early artists played with her exact positioning. In one image, the river goddess almost leans against Shiva's head. In others, the artist has confidently placed her along the ringlet-like curled ends of one of his dreadlocks. The experimentation was to go on for quite a while, as we see from the image in the Tanjavur temple, which was a dedication of Emperor Rajaraja around the year 1012. Where the artist still uses the band of the aureole as his support for the goddess Ganges. I apologize for the quality of this image. You almost just have to take my word for it that it is there. Another variation occurs with the fiery flame that Shiva holds in his outstretched left hand. Saint Samandar speaks of Shiva holding blazing fire in the hollow of his hand. But the first artists modeling the image of dancing Shiva, those along the upper level, felt it necessary to shield Shiva's palm from the flames. So they placed a mini bowl on his palm, which bears the flames. All three images along the upper level show that, and the image on the far right, a trifle difficult to read, comes from a stone image of dancing Shiva on a Sembian Mahadevi temple. Later on, as you see on the lower level, this morphs into the flames emerging from Shiva's very palm. The phase of early experimentation with images of dancing Shiva, and I certainly haven't given you anything like a comprehensive listing of these experiments, is seen for about 75 years after its first appearance in the mid-10th century. As we explore the introduction of the first images of dancing Shiva, I'd like to draw attention to an intriguing and largely ignored inscription that's in the nature of a label. It's carved against the pedestal of a dancing Shiva image commissioned for a temple along the coastal belt. It appears to refer to the dance of Shiva as Deshi, meaning local. And inscriptions in other temples speak of Deshi songs, presumably songs in the local vernacular of Tamil, as distinct from Sanskrit. This Deshi local dance, unique to the Tamil region of South India, its form is unique, may have later acquired the Sanskrit name of Dance of Bliss. Be that as it may, it was Sembian who transformed dancing Shiva into the hugely popular icon it was to become, so that she emerges as an arbiter of artistic taste. What might have been the incentive, the impetus, the passion that motivated Sembian to feature large stone images of dancing Shiva in her temples, and to encourage the creation of bronzes of the wondrous dancer in temple after temple? I turn to a neglected possibility that I'd like to raise with you: the role played in her decision by her husband Gandharaditya's intense dedication to dancing Shiva. His poem on dancing Shiva was so highly regarded that it was added to the corpus of the Tamil sacred hymns, those 700 hymns of Samandar, Appar, and Sundarar. Sembian's pretty determined espousal of the form of the expert dancer in stone and bronze may perhaps have been inspired by Gandharaditya's hymn on dancing Shiva at Tillai, Tillai being the Tamil name for Chidambaram. Its verse 3 starts by asking, "When shall I get to see your dance in the golden hill of southern Tillai?" Verse 6 ends thus, "He who dances in the splendid golden hall in Tillai, when shall I see him?" And in the signature verse, he identifies himself as Gandharadityan, king of Thanjavur, who has woven this garland of sweet words on the dancer in the splendid golden hall of Tillai. Was Sembian herself devout? Very possibly, although she may have astutely realized also that devotion was a widowed queen's chief avenue to power and prominence. Hers must have been a lonely existence, sort of shades of Elizabeth I of England. Yet she triumphed against all odds. Bronzes of the expert dancer are seen in every single temple in Tamil Nadu from the late 10th century onwards. An estimate of 3,000 Chola bronzes is probably close to correct. While inscriptions frequently speak of gifts of gem-studded gold jewelry to adorn him when he is on the move. One inscription from dozens I could quote speaks of processions of the expert dancer. It's an inscription inscribed in Rajaraja's great temple at Thanjavur, which we will look at next time. It speaks of the payment made to 5 drummers, whose task was to sound the drums and announce the commencement of a festival honoring dancing Shiva in order to invite devotees to join in. The inscription is very specific. The drummers were to repeatedly proclaim, "The expert dancer will be carried in procession for 3 days starting today. The expert dancer will be carried in procession for 3 days starting today." As we part company today, I will anticipate a question that you may have. Why am I convinced that this svelte image from the hands of a talented artist from a coastal workshop is a portrait of Queen Sembian? A number of reasons that are highly persuasive when considered together. We know, for instance, from an inscription of the year 1019, that Emperor Rajendra gave a gift of gold to the coastal temple at Sembian Mahadevi, the town and temple named after the queen. And its purpose? To provide additional support for a procession focused on the bronze of Queen Sembian that was carried through town to celebrate her birthday in the month of April-May. Okay, you might say, but why would the queen be modeled on the goddess Uma, consort of god Shiva? Well, portraiture involving verisimilitude in the sense of warts and all was not the tradition in India. To the contrary, literary evidence confirms that it was commonplace for royal portraits to be based on the imagery of the gods. In a play based on India's Ramayana epic, written by dramatist Bhasa in pre-Chola times, the prince is Bharata. He returns from a trip unaware that his father has died while he was away. He comes upon a shrine outside the capital. He admires the standing figures carved within. He decides they must be gods and prepares to bow to them in worship. The keeper of the shrine has to alert the prince to the fact that this is not a temple of the gods. No, it's an ancestral portrait gallery of the local rulers of Ayodhya, the prince's own family line, and that the last figure in the line is his own father, who had died while he was away. If the audience of the play didn't laugh at the prince for not recognizing his own father, it was because royal portraits were more or less indistinguishable from the gods. This poised figure is very much in the mold of goddess Uma, who always holds a flower in her upraised right hand and allows the left hand to rest gracefully by her side. Yet this is not Uma. An undeniable gravitas, a composed, inward-looking absorption, a solemn preoccupation, a rapt concentration, all seems to set her apart from standard images of Uma. The bronze exudes a personalized charisma of a sort that seems to make a clear statement of difference, of being out of the standard mold, of being her own individual. I see her as the creation of a superb artist who set out to subtly convey the queen's distinctive personality. And he did this with great success. To me, she is Chola Queen Sembian. Thank you.